God, they've come for me. Why? I vandalized the toilet.
Welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in Moon Knight, Episode 2. So if you're confused about Episode 1 and what was happening to Oscar Isaac, we've put out a few explainer videos. But basically, in the comics, the character suffers from Dissociative Identity Disorder, or DID, commonly known as multiple personality disorder. So when Stephen was speaking to his other self in the mirror, he was communicating with Marc Spector, the mercenary who became Moon Knight in the comics. We begin with echoes of Moon Knight's fight with the jackal spirit that was doing the bidding of Ammit, and the camera begins moving across sand, making us think that this is the sands of the desert, and it turns out to be the sand surrounding Stephen's bed. But this does foreshadow the last shot of the episode, which actually does end in Cairo. When he wakes up, he first believes that the fight was on his mind.
I remember it much as one recalls a dream or a nightmare.
And then he looks at his reflection in his triple vanity, but we only see two reflections because at this point, he's only aware of one other identity, Mark. Now in the comics, Mark has several identities, and we actually think that we've seen major hints about one of the other identities in this series so far, which we're going to cover in a video in just a couple of days. But we can see hints of this third identity when the camera slowly moves and a third reflection comes into frame, just out of focus. When he enters the museum, the camera hangs upside down to show that his entire world is about to be twist-turned upside down.
So take a minute, just sit right there.
That's enough.
Sorry, I love you.
I love you too. The security guard still calls Steve by the wrong name.
Is that you, Scotty?
Still Stephen.
Which is probably a hint that sometimes Stephen shows up here as one of his other identities. He warns the guard.
It's like Area 51, like MI6 bonkers, bruv.
Now, Area 51 is the all-too-real place where the government pretends to store alien tech to throw us off their scent. And MI6 is the British spy agency that James Bond works for. Now, in the comics, there is another group called MI13, composed of heroes like Blade, the Black Knight, and Union Jack. I'm bringing them up because we have a video coming out really soon about how it looks like Blade is forming a similar team in England, the MCU's version of the Midnight Suns. Now, I thought this large bank of monitors was an interesting design choice because video footage is a way of looking at past versions of yourself. In many ways, another version of you. So this large bank of monitors reflects Stephen's shattered psyche. This is not the last visual reminder of this that we'll see in this episode. After he explains the monster, the guard says,
Hound of the Baskervilles was it?
Now, The Hound of the Baskervilles is the first Sherlock Holmes novel about a Scooby-Doo-like murder where everyone blames a supernatural dog, the cursed Hound of the Baskervilles. But it later turns out that the Hound was just a real dog and a human was behind the murders. Look, you get it. Now, the reason that's used here is because Stephen's trying to say it's supernatural, but the guard's like, no, it's going to all turn out to be your fault. So when Stephen gets called into HR, he focuses on this water feature showing two different pools cascading into one another. Now, I could be reading too much into this, but I think there's some symbolism here. After all, Stephen is very fixated on this image. Water is often a metaphor for the soul or the unconscious. This water could represent the soul of Mark and Stephen, and each pool is a different identity that collects the soul temporarily. The minds are connected but apart, like planes in the sky. But the soul lives on in both minds as the water flows into both pools, and this soul has been promised to Khonshu. And when the meeting ends, Stephen has to surrender his name tag, in effect surrendering his identity, a way of symbolizing that he's about to surrender his life of independence to Mark and Khonshu. And also, Stephen sees his reflection in the desk, another way of hinting at the multiple identities. There is also meaning in the Egyptian statues in the man's office. This appears to be a god with the head of a crocodile. This could be Ammit, the villain of the show, or it could be Sobek, the god of the Nile. But this painting is very interesting. It looks like Sekhmet. This lion goddess was a warrior and the alter ego of Bast. Yes, Bast from Black Panther.
Received a vision from the Panther goddess Bast, who led him to the heart-shaped herb.
Now, we put out a video last week discussing the connection between these gods, Black Panther and Bast. I think it's interesting that they would show a warrior alter ego here, since Mark is essentially Stephen's warrior alter ego. Next, he's in this same square talking to a living statue named Crawley, who is one of Moon Knight's street-level informants in the comics. He even looks like him. Mark decides to go off in search of a storage locker, which is also a metaphor. The mind is like a large storage locker where different memories are kept, or in Stephen's case, locked away. So by unlocking the locker, he's trying to to unlock these parts of his mind. And these lockers are also like the pathways in ancient pyramids or tombs. Then he finds out that Mark is living in the locker, urn style. The QR code on the door is a really fun Easter egg. When you scan it, you are taken to a free digital comic of Werewolf by Night number 32, the first appearance of Moon Knight. This is a cool way to acknowledge his creators, Doug Moench and Don Perlin. Then he sees Mark's passport listing his birthplace as Illinois, and he was from Chicago in the comics. His birthday is in 1987, the year when Moon Knight joined the West Coast Avengers. Now this whole sequence, finding his own passport, money in storage, and having no memory of any of this, is also pretty reminiscent of the first Jason Bourne movie. Then he finds the Scarab, which levitates like a golden snitch.
He's got the snitch!
Stephen calls his reflection,
And in the mirror.
which could be a reference to the Michael Jackson song. Mark then tries to give him the TLDR on their origin.
I serve Khonshu. I'm his avatar.
Now, one detail that I like here is that he sees Mark's reflection in the gun, reflecting that Mark is the violent persona between the two. Then Khonshu chases after him, and he looks awesome. In the old Moon Knight comics, Khonshu was just a statue, but in the more recent books, he's depicted as this mummy creature with a rook skull for a head, which later became the rook skull wearing a nice suit. It's a killer design, and it looks perfect in this show. Congratulations! But you know, for an all-powerful Egyptian deity, hasn't done much about his hair loss. Someone really should have told Khonshu that the best way to prevent hair loss is to start when you still have hair left. And that is why I use Keeps. They're the sponsor of this video. There's a history of hair loss in my family, so when my hair started to thin, I didn't waste any time. So believe me, if your hair is starting to thin, don't put this off. Start using Keeps now. Treatments can take up to 4 to 6 months or more to see results, and it's important to act fast, and you have to start early and stick with it. The sooner you start using Keeps, the more hair you will save. It's even proven to work on a mummy scalp. Keeps has more 5-star reviews than any of their competitors, and hundreds of thousands of men trust Keeps for their hair loss prevention medication. So look, guys, if you're losing your hair, do something about it. For a limited time, go to keeps.com/screencrush or click the link in the description to get 50% off your first order. Back to the Easter eggs. And then we meet Mark's wife, Layla, who seems like she's based on his girlfriend Marlene from the comics. Now, Marlene was the daughter of an archaeologist who dies in the comics during Moon Knight's origin. Presumably, that's the same archaeologist's death that Mark is blamed for in this show. After Mark is resurrected by Khonshu, he and Marlene go live together. Now, in this series, she even refers to their adventures.
What we fought side by side for.
In the comics, at first she aids his fight against evil, but eventually she can't handle dealing with his multiple identities and she leaves him. Interestingly enough, the identity that she felt closest to in the comics was Stephen, though she eventually has a baby with Jake Lockley. Comics are weird. Back at his apartment, she holds up a book by Marceline Desbordes-Valmore, and the poem is called Les Séparés, or in English, Apart. This poem is important because it is both Layla and Stephen's favorite poem.
Sans toi, c'est la nuit sans flambeau.
It's about a person who is in love, but has essentially separated themselves from the other person they love because they're better off without them. The phrase, "don't write," is repeated throughout, telling the lover to stay away, don't contact them, don't write. And this could be why the Stephen persona was created to begin with, as a way to keep Layla out of Mark's dangerous life. Him not returning her missed calls is another way of saying, don't write to me. She serves him divorce papers, and we actually had a big hint that they were married from the end credits last episode, which featured 2 wedding rings next to their picture. Now, we have a whole video coming out soon about Mark's identities and hints that we've seen not 2, but 3 of them so far. Starting us off with Stephen was brilliant because it makes the audience think that he's the real guy. Now, eventually, I think that Mark is going to confront him and prove that he's not real by asking him to recall specific memories, like one of the all-time best episodes of Batman the Animated Series.
Do you remember your first kiss? Your favorite song? The last time you tasted a really good steak?
He's also been studying Egyptian funeral rites, which also makes me think that Mark invented Stephen to help him understand Egyptian mythology, and maybe to find a way to escape from serving Khonshu. The book on the table next to the duffel bag is In Search of Australia and the South Pacific, Reader's Digest People and Places series. Not really the kind of book that Stephen might use, but definitely useful to a globe-trotting mercenary like Marc Spector. And then Stephen is arrested and he missed a big clue that the cops were fakes. Their names are Fitzgerald and Kennedy, like John Fitzgerald Kennedy, former president.
DC Fitzgerald and DC Kennedy here.
Yeah, one second.
They drive by Tower Bridge, which looks nice and repaired after the ending of Far From Home. Well done, Britain! In Marc's police record, his file number with Interpol is 1975, followed by a bunch of other numbers, and his first appearance was in 1975 in the aforementioned Werewolf by Night number 32. The agent assigned to him is Nick Pepin, who's been part of Marvel's production and development crew since 2016 and has worked on all these new TV shows. When Harrow nabs him, he asks,
Do you think that Khonshu chose you as his avatar because your mind would be so easy to break, or because it was broken already?
And this is true in later issues of the comics, when it's revealed that Khonshu wanted to take Marc's body for himself, so he chose an avatar with an already weak mind who would be easy to break. And I just want to shout out how great Ethan Hawke is in this series. His character is so gentle, so polite, like I'm sure a lot of cult leaders are. And this is by far my favorite part of the episode.
Goat. Yes.
Goats have a significant religious experience in many ancient cultures. Heck, even Thor's chariot was pulled by goats in Norse mythology.
You mocking me?
But goats were often used for sacrifice, which is interesting because Harrow's cult talks a lot about making sacrifices for Ammit. Later on, he compares this to cutting off a diseased limb.
Amputation, horrific and grotesque, is necessary for the larger health.
So, their desire to weed out evil is, in many ways, an act of sacrifice. We've already seen at least one cult member who was willing to sacrifice herself for Ammit's cause. Then Harrow and Stephen get into a discussion about judging someone before they actually commit an evil act.
All right, if Amit judges people pre-evil, like before the fact, then isn't she judging an innocent person? I mean, a thought can't be evil, can it?
This is what Ammit does in ancient mythology. Anubis weighs the heart of each person against a feather of truth, and if their soul is lighter than the feather, they get to enter the grassy field of the afterlife. If it's heavy, then Ammit devours the person's soul. The woman in episode 1 even says that she's done nothing evil, but her soul is still rejected because Ammit says that she will do something evil. Now this is called judging on a preconceived notion, or morality based on predeterminism. It was the plot of Minority Report, where Tom Cruise is a cop who arrests people before they commit crimes based on psychic predictions.
You're supposed to kill me. You said you would.
It's also the basis for the very underappreciated Westworld Season 3. I will die on that hill. That is a great season of television. And we also meet Victor, who says he's from Yucatan. In the comics, Dr. Victoria Grail is in the Yucatan and saved by Moon Knight and then teams up with him to take down Harrow. The Yucatan is also where a colony of Atlanteans settled and created pyramids. The song playing at the cult is Every Grain of Sand by Bob Dylan, which we actually heard in the opening of the first episode.
In the time of my confession.
This is a beautiful song and one of Dylan's most spiritual. He basically says that in his lowest moments, his point of confession, he can see the work of God, even in every grain of sand. Harrow is constantly humbling himself by walking on broken glass, bringing himself to his lowest moment so he can better appreciate Ammit's power. His cultists are watching slow motion nature videos, and I'm guessing this is a way for them to be attuned with nature, like a kind of meditation to harmonize your soul with your surroundings. And if the whale here looks familiar, it's because that species is your mom. I loved the detail that when he begins to use the cane, the hummingbird flies in place as if time has stopped. Then Harrow uses the cane's purple magic to open a hole in reality and release a jackal creature. Now Anubis, the Egyptian god of death, has the head of a jackal. And since Ammit judges the dead, all this tracks. I also point out that it's purple magic because, in the MCU, the color of magic energy always has a specific design purpose. The Power Stone is purple, and it has the ability to destroy all life on a planet, just with contact. And Agatha's dark magic was purple. So purple tends to equal like raw, evil, dark side power. But also, think of vibranium, the heart-shaped herb, and the Panther god Bast. All are portrayed as purple. Now last week we posted a video that theorized that the Egyptian and Wakandan gods are all the same aliens from outer space, and these purple color schemes lend credence to that theory. Now in the comics, Moon Knight isn't usually a person with powers. He's a regular guy with gadgets like Batman. There was a period where he was bitten by a werewolf and his powers were affected by the phases of the moon. But here, in the show, Khonshu has given him a full mystical ability to summon his suit. Now it's interesting that the suit is shaped by the person who summons it. So when Stephen hears,
"There's a suit, I've seen you use it, you bring it out,"
he pictures a suit and tie, so that's what he brings into existence. Now this is the appearance of a Moon Knight personality from the comics called Mr. Knight, from the Warren Ellis run of the books. Mr. Knight is less of a superhero and more of a consultant to the police and a private detective. He rides around in a limo and is less violent, more subtle than Moon Knight. Still pretty brutal though. Now here, he's kind of a goofball.
Pretty cool, actually. Huh, I like this.
The jackal.
When he's fighting the invisible jackal, it looks an awful lot like the narrator's fight in Fight Club, another story about protector personalities and DID. And then he pulls off a superhero landing.
Such a poser.
He says,
like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
A reference to Muhammad Ali's famous quote.
Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
Now this bus has an advertisement for the GRC, the Global Repatriation Council. This is the group charged with housing refugees and distributing food that we saw in Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
The only power I have is that I believe we can do better.
The top of the bus reads WBN32, an Easter egg for the aforementioned Werewolf by Night, number 32, first appearance of Moon Knight. Then Mark takes control and we get our first full-on Moon Knight action sequence. This suit looks amazing, and the rooftop chase is everything fans wanted to see from the character. Then he impales the jackal next to a cathedral, another religious site on a show that is all about religious faith. He's also beside this glass pyramid, and he sees his reflection in shattered glass, reflecting his shattered state of mind. This visual was first used to portray Moon Knight's identities by the great artist Bill Sienkiewicz. This conversation between Mark and Steven is heartbreaking, especially if Steven turns out to be the alter personality and Mark is real.
I don't like it.
Long time.
I don't want it.
I don't
Steven,
believe
you.
I don't trust anything you say. You hurt people. But I'm never going to let you hurt anyone else ever again.
Steven, shut up!
Mark ends up kicking the glass, a way to metaphorically bury his alter personality. This shot was also foreshadowed by the end credits. Also, the checkered pattern on the courtyard matches the shirt that Steven wears in this episode. The alternating black and white squares also represent his different personalities. Much like the checkered pattern of a chessboard, the colors cannot ever be together, though they inhabit the same space. Mark and Khonshu have a conversation where at one point, Mark is framed in a halo of light, like a divine figure in a Renaissance painting, because he has been anointed by a god. Then we get this brilliant transition taking us to Egypt. Now, a few things to notice here. The mirror in the hotel room is cracked, Colonel Willard style. Oscar Isaac is holding a bottle of booze, and it doesn't look like that this personality is surprised to be here. So I don't think that this is Mark or Steven at all. This is the third personality, the rough and tumble cab driver, Jake Lockley. But we have a video coming out soon explaining him and all the clues that that theory is right. And here's an Easter egg that we missed last week. In the credits, we see the reflection of the Cairo Tower and Egypt Museum, the tallest building in Egypt. It ripples and turns into Big Ben, a prominent feature of London. This symbolizes that these Egyptian adventures and the presence of Khonshu were lurking inside of Steven all along.
What?
And the last shot in the credits has changed from the previous episode. Now it's Mr. Knight. The song at the end credits is called El Malouk, and there's one lyric that I found very appropriate to the show. The king has arrived and there's no escape from the lions. In other words, Moon Knight has arrived in Cairo and all hell is about to break loose. Well, that's all the Easter eggs that we found, but if you found any, let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.